What if one of the most powerful weapons against cancer isn't hidden inside a futuristic laboratory, but already living inside the human body? Now, that may sound unbelievable, but here's what's really happening inside your body right now. Trillions of bacteria are constantly interacting with your immune system, metabolism, inflammation pathways, hormones, and even the behavior of abnormal cells. In fact, scientists now understand that the human microbiome, especially the bacteria living in the gut, acts almost like a hidden organ inside the body. And what's fascinating is that certain beneficial bacteria may help create an internal environment where cancer cells struggle to survive and grow. Now, before we go further, let me clarify something very important. Cancer is an extremely complex disease. There is no single bacteria, food, supplement, or lifestyle habit that cures cancer universally. And anyone promising miracle cures is not respecting the science. But what the research increasingly shows is that the immune system, inflammation, gut bacteria, metabolism, and blood vessel growth all influence how cancer behaves inside the body. And this is where the conversation becomes incredibly important, because for decades, many people viewed bacteria as dangerous invaders. But modern science is revealing something much deeper. Some bacteria protect us. Some bacteria help regulate inflammation. Some strengthen immune surveillance. Some produce anti-inflammatory compounds. Some even appear to influence how effectively the immune system identifies abnormal cells. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your immune system is like a highly trained security team protecting a city. Beneficial gut bacteria act almost like intelligence officers, helping security identify suspicious activity early. But when the microbiome becomes damaged through ultra-processed diets, chronic stress, sleep deprivation, excessive antibiotics, smoking, metabolic dysfunction, and inflammation, the communication system weakens. And when immune communication weakens, abnormal cellular behavior may become harder to control efficiently. Now, one of the most exciting areas of cancer research today involves how gut bacteria influence immunotherapy outcomes. Some studies have found that patients with more diverse and healthier gut microbiomes often respond better to certain immune-based cancer therapies. That is an extraordinary discovery, because it suggests the microbiome may help train immune cells to function more effectively. And here's where lifestyle becomes critically important. Your microbiome is shaped every single day by food choices, fiber intake, sleep quality, stress levels, movement, environmental exposures, medication use. In other words, your daily habits help shape the biological environment inside your body. In today's video, we're going to break down how beneficial bacteria interact with the immune system, why inflammation fuels disease progression, the specific bacteria being studied in cancer research, foods that support beneficial gut bacteria naturally, how metabolism and the microbiome are connected, and practical ways to support a healthier internal environment. Because once you understand the relationship between bacteria, immunity, and cellular health, you begin realizing that health is not simply about fighting disease. It's about building resilience inside the body. And if this kind of science-based health content is helpful to you, consider subscribing, because every week we break down complex medical science into practical tools people can use to improve their health naturally. Because the future of health may not just be about destroying disease, but supporting the systems inside the body that help protect us in the first place. One of the biggest misunderstandings in modern health is the idea that bacteria are always harmful. But here's what's really going on inside your body. You're not just human cells. You are an entire ecosystem. In fact, trillions of microorganisms live inside the digestive tract, on the skin, and throughout the body, and many of them play essential roles in survival. Some help digest food, some produce vitamins, some regulate inflammation, some communicate directly with the immune system. And remarkably, certain beneficial bacteria may help create conditions that make it harder for abnormal cells to grow unchecked. Now again, we need to stay scientifically accurate here. No bacteria kills 99% of cancer universally in the human body. Cancer is extremely complex and varies across tissues, genetics, metabolism, immune response, and environmental factors. But there are bacteria being actively studied because of how powerfully they influence immune function and inflammation regulation. And one of the most discussed groups are bacteria that produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids, especially butyrate. Now, butyrate is fascinating because it acts almost like a signaling molecule between gut bacteria and human cells. And what the research shows is that butyrate may help reduce inflammatory signaling, support the intestinal barrier, improve immune regulation, influence abnormal cell behavior, support healthy cell turnover, fiber plus beneficial bacteria butyrate, inflammation plus cus, immune regulation fiber, plus beneficial bacteria, right arrow butyrate, right arrow, heat down arrow, inflammation plus U paro, immune regulation fiber plus beneficial bacteria butyrate, inflammation plus cus, immune regulation. Now let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your gut lining is like the walls protecting a city. Beneficial bacteria help maintain and repair those walls. But when the microbiome becomes damaged through ultra-processed diets, excessive sugar, chronic stress, lack of sleep, smoking, alcohol abuse, or repeated antibiotic disruption, cracks begin forming in the barrier. And once the barrier weakens, inflammatory compounds and toxins may enter circulation more easily. This process is sometimes associated with increased systemic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is one of the biggest drivers of disease progression in the modern world. Not just cancer, but also obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, autoimmune dysfunction, accelerated aging. Because inflammation changes the biological environment surrounding cells. Now here's something incredibly important many people overlook. Cancer cells do not exist in isolation. They exist within a microenvironment. Blood vessels, immune cells, inflammatory compounds, hormones, nutrients, metabolic signals. All of these influence how cells behave. This is why metabolic health matters so much. High insulin levels, chronic inflammation, and poor immune regulation may create conditions that support disease progression over time. And this is one reason gut bacteria are now receiving enormous attention in medical research. Some beneficial bacteria appear to help regulate T cells, important immune cells involved in identifying abnormal cellular activity. Others help produce anti-inflammatory compounds that reduce oxidative stress. And fascinatingly, some studies suggest healthier microbiome diversity may improve responses to certain immunotherapy treatments. That is an extraordinary area of research, because it suggests the microbiome may influence how effectively the immune system recognizes threats. Now let's make this practical. How do you support beneficial bacteria naturally? The answer is surprisingly simple, although not always easy in the modern food environment. Beneficial bacteria thrive on fiber-rich whole foods, especially vegetables, legumes, beans, oats, flax seeds, chia seeds, garlic, onions, asparagus, berries. These foods act almost like fertilizer for healthy bacteria. Now, fermented foods may also support microbial diversity in some individuals. Yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, but consistency matters more than occasional healthy meals, because the microbiome changes based on repeated patterns, not isolated actions. And one of the fastest ways to damage microbial diversity is excessive ultra-processed food intake. Highly processed foods often contain emulsifiers, artificial additives, excess sugar, refined oils, low fiber. These patterns may negatively affect microbial balance while increasing inflammatory signaling over time. Now here's another fascinating connection. Exercise also influences the microbiome. Movement improves circulation, metabolic flexibility, insulin sensitivity, and even microbial diversity. Again, the body is interconnected. Gut health affects immunity. Immunity affects inflammation. Inflammation affects metabolism. Metabolism affects cellular signaling. Nothing operates independently. And this is why root cause medicine focuses on improving the terrain inside the body, not just reacting to symptoms after dysfunction develops. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing, because understanding how the microbiome influences metabolism, inflammation, and long-term health gives you practical tools that go far beyond temporary health trends. Now let's go deeper into one of the most important concepts in modern disease research: the relationship between inflammation, metabolism, and immune surveillance. Because here's what's really going on inside your body. Your immune system is constantly scanning for abnormal activity. Every single day, damaged or abnormal cells can emerge inside the body. But in healthy conditions, the immune system often recognizes and removes many of those cells before they become larger problems. That process is called immune surveillance. And this is where metabolic health becomes incredibly important. Because chronic inflammation and metabolic dysfunction may weaken the environment the immune system depends on to function efficiently. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine the immune system as a highly trained security force patrolling a city. If communication systems are strong, energy supplies are stable, and inflammation is controlled, security teams respond quickly and efficiently. But if the city is overwhelmed with smoke, chaos, poor communication, and constant stress signals, detection becomes harder. That's similar to what chronic inflammation does biologically. Now, inflammation itself is not inherently bad. Acute inflammation is part of healing. If you cut your skin or fight an infection, temporary inflammation helps the body repair damage. The problem is chronic low-grade inflammation that never fully shuts off, and modern lifestyles often continuously activate inflammatory pathways through excessive ultra-processed foods, chronic stress, poor sleep, smoking, sedentary behavior, obesity, blood sugar instability. Over time, this creates a biological environment that may contribute to cellular dysfunction. Now, one of the major drivers of chronic inflammation is insulin resistance, and this is critical to understand. When people repeatedly consume large amounts of refined carbohydrates and sugar while remaining inactive, insulin levels often stay elevated chronically. Chronic high insulin, inflammation, metabolic flexibility, chronic high insulin, right arrow, shoop arrow, inflammation, and down arrow, metabolic flexibility, chronic high, insulin, inflammation plus metabolic flexibility. Now, insulin itself is not the enemy. Insulin is essential for survival, but chronically elevated insulin may increase inflammatory signaling and metabolic stress over time. This is one reason obesity and metabolic syndrome are strongly associated with higher risks for multiple chronic diseases, because fat tissue is not metabolically inactive, especially visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat surrounding organs. Visceral fat acts almost like an inflammatory organ itself. It releases inflammatory compounds that influence hormones, immune signaling, blood vessels, and metabolic pathways throughout the body. This is why improving metabolic health matters far beyond appearance. Now, here's where the microbiome becomes deeply connected to metabolism. Certain beneficial gut bacteria help regulate blood sugar and inflammatory responses. Some bacteria influence how efficiently fiber is converted into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. And butyrate may help improve gut barrier integrity while reducing inflammatory stress. Meanwhile, poor dietary patterns often reduce microbial diversity and increase inflammatory signaling. This creates a cycle. Poor diet increases inflammation. Inflammation worsens insulin resistance. Insulin resistance worsens metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic dysfunction increases inflammatory stress. And the cycle continues. Now, another fascinating area of research involves fasting and metabolic repair. During periods without constant food intake, insulin levels tend to fall, and the body shifts toward repair and energy mobilization pathways. Some studies suggest fasting-related pathways may support autophagy, cellular cleanup, improved insulin sensitivity, reduced oxidative stress. Again, this does not mean fasting is a cure for disease. But metabolically, periods of reduced feeding may create different biological conditions compared to constant eating and snacking. And importantly, many people in modern society rarely allow insulin to fall because they eat continuously from early morning until late at night. Now let's make this practical. One of the most powerful anti-inflammatory strategies is surprisingly simple. Prioritize whole foods, increase fiber intake, stabilize blood sugar, sleep deeply, walk daily, reduce ultra-processed foods, manage stress consistently. These habits influence the terrain inside the body, and over time, biology adapts to those repeated signals. Now, another overlooked factor is sleep. Poor sleep increases cortisol and inflammatory signaling while impairing glucose regulation. Even short-term sleep deprivation can worsen insulin sensitivity measurably. This is why recovery is not optional. The immune system repairs and recalibrates during deep sleep. And without adequate recovery, the body becomes metabolically stressed. Again, everything is connected. The microbiome influences immunity. Immunity influences inflammation. Inflammation influences metabolism. Metabolism influences cellular health. And once you begin understanding the body as an interconnected system rather than isolated symptoms, health starts making much more sense. Now let's talk about one of the most empowering parts of this entire conversation. How your daily food choices may help shape the internal environment where beneficial bacteria thrive. Because many people hear the word microbiome and assume it requires expensive probiotics or complicated supplements. But here's what's really going on inside your body. Your gut bacteria are constantly responding to what you feed them. Every meal sends instructions. Some foods nourish beneficial bacteria associated with metabolic balance and immune support. Other foods may encourage inflammatory patterns and reduce microbial diversity over time. And this matters because diversity in the microbiome is increasingly associated with resilience. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your gut ecosystem like a rainforest. A healthy rainforest contains many different species working together in balance. But when diversity disappears, the ecosystem becomes fragile and unstable. The same principle applies inside the human body. Now, one of the most powerful tools for supporting beneficial bacteria is fiber. And this is where many modern diets fail dramatically. Most ultra-processed foods are low in natural fiber and high in refined carbohydrates, sugar, additives, and industrial processing. But beneficial bacteria thrive on fermentable fibers found in whole plant foods, especially vegetables. Lentils, beans, oats, apples, berries, garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus. These foods act almost like fuel for beneficial microbes. And when bacteria ferment these fibers, they produce compounds like butyrate that help regulate inflammation and support gut barrier integrity. Whole plant foods, microbial diversity, immune resilience, whole plants, foods hidratado, recupero, microbial diversity, hidratado, recupero, immune resilience, whole plant foods, microbial diversity, immune resilience. Now, another fascinating category is polyphenols. Polyphenols are natural compounds found in colorful plant foods. And interestingly, beneficial bacteria help metabolize polyphenols into bioactive compounds that may support cellular health. This creates a two-way relationship. Healthy foods support bacteria. Healthy bacteria help process healthy foods more effectively. Foods rich in polyphenols include berries, green tea, cocoa, olive oil, pomegranates, herbs and spices. And many of these foods are also associated with lower inflammatory stress and healthier aging patterns. Now let's talk about fermented foods. Fermented foods naturally contain beneficial microorganisms that may help support microbial diversity in some people. Examples include yogurt with live cultures, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, tempeh. Now, fermented foods are not magic cures, but they may contribute to a healthier microbial environment when combined with an overall nutrient-dense lifestyle. And one important point many people miss is this: you cannot out-supplement a damaging lifestyle. If someone consumes ultra-processed foods constantly, sleeps poorly, remains chronically stressed, and never moves their body, taking probiotics alone is unlikely to fully compensate for that environment, because the microbiome responds to patterns, not isolated interventions. Now, another major disruptor of microbial health is chronic stress. Stress hormones influence digestion, gut permeability, inflammation, and microbial balance directly. This is why emotional stress often creates physical digestive symptoms. The gut and brain are deeply connected through what scientists call the gut-brain axis. And fascinatingly, some gut bacteria even influence neurotransmitter production and mood signaling. Again, the body functions as an interconnected system. Now let's talk about antibiotics for a moment. Antibiotics can absolutely save lives when medically necessary. But excessive or unnecessary antibiotic exposure may reduce microbial diversity significantly. This is why recovery afterward becomes important. Fiber-rich foods, nutrient-dense meals, fermented foods if tolerated, sleep, stress management, movement, all help support restoration of microbial balance over time. Now, one of the most overlooked microbiome supporting behaviors is simply eating more consistently from whole foods prepared at home. Why? Because restaurant and packaged foods often contain hidden additives, excess sodium, industrial oils, emulsifiers, and refined sugars that may negatively influence metabolic and inflammatory pathways. Meanwhile, whole foods provide fiber, micronutrients, antioxidants, phytochemicals, better satiety signaling, and your bacteria respond accordingly. Now, another powerful factor is meal timing. Constant grazing all day long may not allow the digestive system adequate recovery periods. Some evidence suggests overnight fasting windows may help support microbial rhythm and metabolic regulation. Again, this is not about perfection or rigid rules. It's about creating an internal environment where beneficial systems can function more effectively. And over time, those repeated signals matter enormously, because your microbiome is not static. It's adapting every single day to the life you live. And when you consistently support that ecosystem through nutrition, sleep, movement, stress regulation, and metabolic health, you may be strengthening one of the body's most important foundations for long-term resilience and healthy aging. Now let's explore one of the most overlooked connections in modern health, the relationship between the microbiome, the brain, and longevity itself. Because when most people think about bacteria, they think only about digestion. But here's what's really going on inside your body. Your gut and brain are in constant communication. In fact, scientists now refer to this as the gut-brain axis, a massive communication network involving the nervous system, hormones, immune signaling, inflammatory pathways, neurotransmitters, microbial metabolites, and remarkably, some beneficial gut bacteria may influence how the brain handles stress, inflammation, and even cognitive function. Now, this becomes extremely important when we talk about aging, because chronic inflammation doesn't just affect metabolism or the immune system. It also affects the brain. Over time, elevated inflammatory signaling and metabolic dysfunction may contribute to brain fog, mood instability, poor focus, fatigue, memory decline, accelerated neurological aging. And one of the biggest drivers of this process is chronic stress. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your nervous system like an electrical grid powering an entire city. When stress becomes chronic, it's like repeated electrical surges damaging the system over time. Now combine that with poor sleep, blood sugar instability, inflammation, ultra-processed foods, sedentary behavior, and the body never fully enters repair mode. This is why recovery becomes biologically essential. Now here's something fascinating. Some gut bacteria help produce or regulate compounds connected to mood and neurological function, including serotonin pathways, GABA signaling, short-chain fatty acids, anti-inflammatory molecules. This helps explain why gut dysfunction is often associated with both physical and emotional symptoms simultaneously. Again, the systems are interconnected. And one of the most important longevity strategies is reducing chronic inflammatory burden over time. Because longevity is not simply about extending years. It's about preserving function, protecting brain function, mobility, energy, metabolic flexibility, immune resilience. Now, another major factor connected to both the microbiome and aging is sleep. Sleep is not passive. Sleep is active biological repair. During deep sleep, the brain clears metabolic waste, hormones rebalance, immune regulation improves, tissue repair accelerates, inflammatory pathways reset, and poor sleep dramatically affects the microbiome and metabolism. Even short periods of sleep deprivation can increase cortisol, insulin resistance, hunger hormones, inflammatory signaling. Poor sleep, cortisol plus, inflammation plus, immune recovery. Poor sleep's right arrow, up arrow, cortisol plus, up arrow, inflammation plus, and down arrow, immune recovery. Poor sleep and cortisol, inflammation plus, immune recovery. This is one reason people often crave sugar and processed foods after poor sleep. The body becomes metabolically dysregulated. Now here's another fascinating area of research. Exercise appears to influence not only metabolism and cardiovascular health, but also microbial diversity itself. Movement improves circulation, insulin sensitivity, mitochondrial function, stress resilience, immune regulation. And some studies suggest physically active individuals often show healthier microbial diversity patterns. Again, movement is not just about burning calories. Movement changes biological communication throughout the body. Now let's make this practical. If someone wants to support long-term resilience and healthier aging, some of the most powerful foundational habits include eating fiber-rich whole foods, prioritizing sleep, walking daily, managing stress consistently, reducing ultra-processed foods, maintaining muscle mass, supporting stable blood sugar, spending time outdoors, protecting circadian rhythm. Notice how none of these are extreme. That's important, because sustainable biology responds best to sustainable behaviors. Now, another critical mindset shift is understanding that health is cumulative. Many chronic diseases develop slowly over years of repeated inflammatory stress and metabolic dysfunction. But the opposite is also true. Small healthy signals repeated consistently may gradually improve resilience over time. And this is where people regain power. Because while genetics matter, environment and lifestyle profoundly influence how genes behave. Food influences inflammation. Sleep influences immunity. Stress influences hormones. Movement influences metabolism. The microbiome influences all of them. Nothing in the body works independently. And once you begin understanding health through this systems-based lens, you stop chasing isolated miracle cures, and you start building biological conditions that support healing, protection, repair, and healthier aging naturally. If this is adding value so far, consider subscribing, because understanding how metabolism, immunity, and the microbiome interact gives you practical tools that can help support your health for decades to come. So after everything we've discussed today, here's the most important takeaway. Your body is not just a collection of organs operating independently. It is an interconnected ecosystem. A living network where the microbiome, immune system, metabolism, brain, hormones, inflammation pathways, and lifestyle habits constantly influence one another. And that changes the way we think about health entirely. Because here's what's really going on inside your body. Every single day, your immune system is working to identify damage, regulate inflammation, and maintain balance. But the environment surrounding your cells matters enormously. Chronic inflammation, poor metabolic health, sleep deprivation, excessive ultra-processed foods, chronic stress. These repeated signals can gradually push the body toward dysfunction over time. Meanwhile, supportive habits help create a different internal environment. Better immune regulation, improved metabolic flexibility, reduced inflammatory stress, stronger gut barrier integrity, healthier aging pathways. And this is why the microbiome has become such an important area of modern medical research. Not because bacteria are magic cures, but because beneficial bacteria influence systems deeply connected to resilience and recovery. Now remember, cancer is incredibly complex. There is no single food, supplement, bacteria, or routine that guarantees prevention or treatment. And anyone making absolute promises is oversimplifying the science. But what research increasingly shows is that the terrain inside the body matters. Inflammation matters, insulin resistance matters, sleep matters, movement matters, microbial diversity matters. And the encouraging news is this: many of these systems respond to lifestyle signals remarkably quickly. Let me explain this with one final analogy. Think of your body like a garden. Every day your habits are either feeding imbalance or nourishing resilience. Fiber-rich foods nourish beneficial bacteria. Sleep restores immune regulation. Movement improves metabolic signaling. Stress reduction lowers inflammatory burden. Whole foods provide protective compounds the body recognizes and utilizes. Small signals, repeated consistently. That is how biology changes. And importantly, this is not about perfection. It's about direction. You do not need to overhaul your entire life overnight. In fact, one of the most powerful things you can do is focus on one foundational improvement at a time. Maybe that's adding more fiber-rich foods, walking daily, improving sleep consistency, reducing ultra-processed foods, managing stress more intentionally, supporting gut health naturally. Because over time, those repeated behaviors influence the environment your cells live in every single day. And that environment matters. Now here's the deeper message behind today's video. Health is not only about fighting disease after it appears, it's about building conditions where the body becomes more resilient before dysfunction develops. That's a completely different mindset. And it's one of the reasons lifestyle medicine, nutrition science, microbiome research, and metabolic health are becoming such powerful areas of modern medicine. Because the future of health may depend less on reacting late, and more on supporting the body's protective systems early and consistently. So here's my challenge for you. Choose one microbiome supporting habit today. Maybe it's eating more vegetables, drinking less sugary beverages, prioritizing sleep tonight, walking after meals, adding fermented foods, reducing processed foods. Then observe how your body responds over time. Because healing and resilience are often built through small daily biological signals repeated consistently. And if this video added value to your life, consider liking the video and subscribing to join a community focused on optimizing health naturally through science-based strategies. Because when you understand the systems inside your body, you become far more empowered to protect your metabolism, strengthen your resilience, and support healthier aging for years to come.